Today's reflection is adapted from the sermon, Our Welcome Table, by the Reverend Margaret A. Beckman, Minister Emeritus at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Castine, Maine. It was originally delivered November 16th of 2016. And when they were all gathered together at the table, Jesus took the bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he shared it with everyone. And when the sun had set and the neighbors were together, the elders took the figs and the olives, and they blessed them, and as they broke the Ramadan fast, they shared them with everyone. And when the young monks had come in from their long day of meditation and were seated on the floor around the low table, the teacher lifted the teapot and she mindfully began to pour the tea for everyone. Sharing the table is fundamental to our culture. It is also deeply embedded in most religious traditions, whether the Buddhist tea ceremony or the Christian communion or the Jewish Passover meal or the Muslim breaking of the Ramadan fast. Sharing the meal is an essential part of who we are and how we express our affection for each other. Those who are welcome to join us at the table are typically those we know and love, or at least those to whom we are related. Not necessarily the same folks, right? We welcome easily those who are like us, those who share our values, our education and economic class, our ways of seeing the world, our philosophical, spiritual, and religious orientations. It's easy to break bread with those with whom we are already comfortable, and that is typically how we fill our tables. Most of you already know where I'm going with this. I'm going to places that are not so easy. The places where we encounter people very different from ourselves. The places that scare us. The places we have thus far refused to go because we do not feel comfortable and safe. We resist sitting at the table with people that are strange to us. What would it be like to expand the welcome you offer for your holiday table? And I mean that both literally and symbolically, both personally and communally. What would it take for you to welcome people so unlike us that we have nothing in common and little to say to each other except that we are all human beings created in the image and likeness of the divine, and really the only thing we need to say to each other is, I love you. Now more than ever, it is important we expand our welcome table. There are powerful forces and people in our nation who are trying to figure out how to keep a great many people from being included at the table they think they now control. People are afraid for their safety, and many are afraid for their lives. These are not idle or inconsequential fears. I think we can expect that in the welcome table of the United States of America is not going to be expanding again anytime soon. It is rather undergoing great pressure to contract. There are those of us who have spent the last many decades trying to include more and more people who have been marginalized or intentionally excluded from the boundaries of our nation table. Now we are faced with an eruption of negative energy trying to tear apart that fabric of inclusion that so many have worked so long to weave together in bright and intricately beautiful patterns. My dear spiritual companions, we must not allow that to happen. We are called to practice hospitality. In these most difficult and challenging times, we are called to practice radical hospitality. Radical hospitality acknowledges the difficulty and the absolute necessity of changing the way we, individually and collectively, welcome people to the table of life. As Father Daniel Horman and Lonnie Gollins-Pratt have written, hospitality is an inescapable moral dimension to it. It is an issue involving what it means to be human. All of our talk about hospitable openness doesn't mean anything as long as some people continue to be tossed aside. They go on to say how radical hospitality is a moral issue. We are talking about human beings, people not very different from you and me. Hospitality understood this way is at once a spiritual imperative and a spiritual practice. It is both the answer to bigotry and injustice and the path to deeper spirituality. I agree with him. You probably do too. The question now is, what do we do? Can we walk our talk and live into the changes that would come as a result of overwhelming achievement of radical hospitality? I've given some thought to just how welcoming I really am, and whether or not I'm prepared to expand the diversity at my own welcome table. It's only partially a rhetorical consideration. In my mind, I'd like to think that I welcome to my table people of all races and ages and ethnicities. I'd like to think I welcome both rich and poor and everyone in the middle. Well, not that there's much of a middle class to America anymore. I want to offer a sincere welcome to the Muslim and the Buddhist and the Mormon and the pagan and the Christian and the agnostic and the atheist and the spiritual but not religious. In my mind, I welcome the heterosexual and the bisexual and the homosexual and the non-sexual. I want to make room for all of these folks who slide across the gender continuum with ease and deliberate nonconformance. The transgender person will be as welcome at my table as anyone else. All this I want to be true because I believe in affirming and promoting the inherent dignity and worth of every person. And I try hard every day with that belief in mind and deed. And yet, if I'm really honest, I'm not sure I can manage it on a consistent basis. Here's the thing. Once I know you, I'll probably be fine with you. I won't need to agree with you or even like you, but I can probably find a way to include you at the table. Trouble is, I don't know that many people distinctly different from myself. Typical, isn't it? Don't most of us hang out with people mostly similar to ourselves? A commitment to radical hospitality demands that I do better. In our reading this morning, radical hospitality is described as a spiritual practice. It's not easy, but our faith demands it. We are called to be radically inclusive. The world is about exclusion. Our faith is about inclusion. We now see that there are many who will, if they can, move us towards excluding all kinds of people. There are those that are actively seeking to reverse human and civil rights for people simply based on race or immigrant status or religion or gender identity or sexual orientation or physical, mental, emotional disability. There are people in real danger in our country right now, more danger than they were a month ago. We must become demonstrably and consistently inclusive, and we must demand the same of our lawmakers and leaders. Let me digress just for a moment. You can stand it. I'd like to shift our discussion to what we find in our lives that increases our personal happiness. Who or what makes a difference in our life? Who or what feeds us with a long-handled spoon when we hunger? Who feeds you with a long-handled spoon when it is you who is hungry? One answer I read last month in an email thread that used the word gems, but I immediately grasped the author's meaning as a long-handled spoon. She said, quote, "My gems have a good sense of humor, are smart, explain their insights and knowledge in a way I can share. They know how to teach without showing off. Some share personal stories, which I love because when people think about their stories and can share what they learn, they are bestowing a gift on those of us who might relate that insight to our lives. Others might share a picture, a poem, a story, a quote, or a soulful experience. When one of those things touches your heart, makes you think in a slightly different way, you have found a gem, a long-handled spoon. And those gems, those spoons, feed me at my table and give me happiness and hopefully some wisdom, sometimes in surprising ways. Those gems in our lives help us to see and feel and understand our surroundings in a different way. The artists and musicians, the writers, those in theater and storytelling, and not necessarily modern. We can lick the spoon of ages past. Like with a line from a poem written by Emerson or Thoreau or Walt Whitman, written before we were ever born. Every month in our UU Unicorn, our music director, Marina, lists some songs from classical composers. A long handle from Handel. Right? Listen to his Messiah or drink in his water music. What is our role? To share gems with others and to really see, feel, and understand the gems that come our way. This, in my view, leads to happiness, to better understanding the world, and increases the likelihood that we can increase someone else's happiness and wisdom. This concludes my digression, but not the work that all of us must be doing. We're going to sing the song, we're going to sit at the welcome table. Only 3 verses in our hymnal, and then we'll repeat the first verse. It turns out this is one of those songs with a life of its own. There are many versions and many different sets of verses. You'll know why that is when we sing it. As we sing, let yourself imagine the face of those who are presently excluded from sitting at the welcome table. Imagine what it would be like to dine in the company of all humanity, in all our wonder and colors and shapes and beliefs and fashions and practices. Imagine the vast array of foods from every corner of the world. Imagine all God's people together to break bread and to drink tea. Imagine. Then, may we be inspired to work towards that day. None of us can do the hard work alone. May we always know we are not alone to do this work. May we have strong, committed companions at every step of the way. We are strong and committed companions. We are the faces and hands of love. May we not disappoint. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be.